I feel like I'm being a bit too harsh on it now in the end because it was fine. I enjoyed it. I could see myself potentially. Hello and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura and today I am talking about The Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton, published in 1975. And then the movie, The Great Train Robbery, was released in 1978 and it was adapted by and directed by Michael Crichton. So this is the first time here on Why the Book Wins that I have covered a movie that was directed by the writer of the book. So I did cover Dark Matter, and Blake Crouch wrote the book and then he created and adapted the TV show. However, he did not direct the TV show, so that's a little different. But yeah, it's always interesting when the author is so closely involved in the movie. And then to have them not only adapt the screenplay, but to be directing the movie, it's definitely not the norm. And I have seen this movie. I watched it many years ago when I was between 10 and 12. And the main reason I still remembered it after all these years was because there is a scene that scared me. And because this is a fun heist movie that I was enjoying watching with my family, the fact that suddenly we get a scene that disturbed me, I was just so shocked by, right? Because I wasn't expecting it. If you're watching a scary movie, you expect to be scared. But a movie like this, young Laura was not ready for the scene they showed, and it scarred me for life, and I have always remembered it. But I can now say that I have faced my demons. I've rewatched this movie, and the scene no longer scares me. Although I will say, I was assuming that I blew it out of proportion in my mind and that when I watched it again, the scene wouldn't be as bad as I remembered. But it actually was I don't know if graphic is the right word, but it was scarier than I anticipated. So I'm like, wow, no wonder 10-year-old Laura was scared by this, because it actually is kind of whoa. But yeah, anyway, stay tuned if you want to hear which scene I am talking about. If you've seen the movie, you probably know what scene I'm talking about. But yeah, we will get to it later in the video. But what does still scare me about this movie is how much wasted potential there is. And I liked the book pretty well, but the book has such a cinematic feel to it that I assumed it would be an even better movie. And maybe in the hands of a different director, it would have been. I guess unless this gets remade, we'll never know for sure. But yeah, this movie definitely didn't live up to my expectations. And this is the fictionalized story of a real train robbery that happened in 1855. But even though the event itself is real and these people are real, Crichton makes up a lot of the details himself in both book and movie. So do not go into this book thinking it is nonfiction like I did. I thought this was all based in truth and everything really happened. But no, some of the more interesting and wild aspects of this robbery, Michael Crichton just made up on his own, so it is fictional, even if it is based on a real robbery. But I did feel like I learned a lot about Victorian England while reading this book, because he does include so many historically accurate details. So even though the details about the actual robbery are fictionalized, I still felt like I learned a lot of history of England in general while reading this book. And I would recommend the book. However, while we are still in the spoiler-free section, there are two things about this book I want to talk about real quick, just to give a heads up to anyone who might be considering reading this, because there are two things about this book that just really disturbed me, and so I just want to give you a warning beforehand. So first of all, we hear in detail about dogfighting that happened at this time in England, and we hear in detail how they train these dogs to become fighters, and just all of these details and the descriptions. I am not someone who's bothered by animals being killed or hurt in books and movies. I don't need to look up trigger warnings for that, because generally that's not what I'm sensitive to. So the fact that reading about this, I just found so upsetting, I feel really says something about just how horrible it was. And then secondly, there is this side plot about a guy who contracts an STD. And back then they believed that the way to cure an STD was to have sex with a virgin. And so I Googled this because I was curious if this was really something that was believed. And yes, it is something that people really did believe, but Googling it led me down to some articles that I wish I had not read, because yeah, it was just very disturbing and very upsetting. And so in this book, the fact that they have this storyline, the fact that it really is based in reality, that's upsetting, that this was a real thing. But then also the way Crichton writes about it, because he writes about it in this weird, almost comical way, which just made it feel all the more wrong and gross. And then this is also a detail that Crichton just chose to add to the story. This didn't actually happen in the real story of the train robbery. And so the fact that he chose to include this detail and then the way he wrote about it, it was just so gross. And I hated this part and it was just so disturbing. So yeah, I would recommend this book, but I would suggest that once you get to the point where they begin talking about the dog fighting or talking about this guy getting the STD, I would suggest you skip ahead a bit and spare yourself the details. And neither of these things are in the movie, so you don't need to worry about it there. But the movie, they talk about dog fighting, but it's not as in detail and we don't actually see it. But what we do see is a ratting dog killing rats. And this wasn't done using fake rats or something. Like, this is a real ratting dog really killing these rats for the movie. And like England's version of PETA found out about this after the fact and they were furious. However, they never actually took legal action for whatever reason. And as said, this is based on a real robbery. So after I talk about the book and movie events, I will then share a bit on what really happened. And from here on out, I will be getting into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So Edward Pierce is a wealthy gentleman who rubs shoulders with the underbelly of London, and he wants to find a way to steal gold that is being transported from England to the soldiers that are fighting the Crimean War. And the gold is transported in 2 safes by train before it reaches the coast and is shipped to France. And so he wants to find a way to steal the gold while it is being transported on this train. And since safes at the time, it was impossible to break into them because dynamite had not yet been invented and they were too heavy to carry off. And so the only option was to find the keys that open the safes, make copies of them, and access the gold that way. And each safe has 2 keys, which means they need a total of 4 keys. And so he partners with Edward Agar, who is the top safe cracker / key maker in England. And the two of them, along with the help of some others, including a guy who works for the railway named Burgess, they make their plans to steal the gold. And in both, Pierce also gets the help of, his girl on the side, whose name is Miriam. And she is in the book, but in the movie, she's definitely a bigger character and is around more often. And it definitely seems like she is in love with Pierce in the movie. And so a large part of this story are them just trying to find where the keys are and then get access to them for long enough so that they can make an impression of them and then later make a duplicate. And 2 keys are kept in the train office, and then another 2 keys are kept by 2 separate guys who work for the bank. By the way, because keys are such a big part of this story, I have these key earrings I am wearing in order to be on theme. But anyway, one of the bank guys who has the key is named Fowler, and he is friends with Pierce. And so when he is amongst Pierce and his gentleman friends, he just straight up tells them where he keeps the key, which is around his neck at all times. And then in the movie, Pierce is with Fowler at the bank and they have Miriam come in, and Fowler is very taken with Miriam. And so Pierce tells him like, hey, I know her and I know how I can hook you guys up. And so then later they take Fowler to this fake brothel they have set up. And when he is alone with Miriam, she gets him to undress. And then while he is distracted with Miriam, Agar takes the key, makes an impression of it, and then puts it back. And then Miriam, she doesn't actually have to have sexual intercourse with Fowler because then as soon as the impression is made, they then have a fake police raid emptying out the brothel and Fowler is rushed out. Whereas in the book, Fowler is the one who gets the STD. And so he approaches Pierce asking where he can get a fresh girl. And so Pierce hooks him up with who he can talk to for this. And then when he is with this young girl, she has him undress and take the key off. And then while they are having sex, they make the imprint of the key. And then the next guy who has the key is a man named Trent. And Trent is tough because he is a very rigid man and he and his wife run a strict household and their servants are very loyal. And he seemingly has no shady affinities, which would make it easy for Pierce to weasel his way into getting the key somehow. But turns out no one is as clean as they appear to be because Trent does have an affinity for dog fighting. And he himself has a dog who is a ratting dog. And so Pierce goes to one of these dog fighting, dog ratting events and he meets up with Trent. And in the book, he gets Trent's interest by talking about how he has like a pristine fighting dog and Trent is very interested in acquiring this dog. And then he also mentions that he is single, but he would someday like to be married. And he does this in the movie as well. He doesn't talk about a fighting dog, but he does simply show that he would make a good suitor for Trent's unmarried daughter. And so in both book and movie, Trent invites him over and he has Pierce meet his daughter and Pierce feigns attraction and the two of them begin to date. And while courting her over time, she eventually lets slip that before the Crimean gold is taken out of the bank onto the train, she said her dad will go down to the wine cellar and have a drink of wine. At least that is what she assumes he does because he doesn't let anyone else go down there with him. And he never goes in the cellar except on those mornings. And so she thinks that he gets stressed out about it. And so he goes down to have a secret drink. But Pierce, he knows oh, he's not getting a drink. That's where the key is hidden. And so then after this, he and Agar are able to sneak into the home, get into the cellar and find the key. key. And then to get the 2 keys from the train office, they need the help of Clean Willy, who is this small guy who is able to climb up things and fit into tight spaces. And the train office is guarded at night, and the only time they can get into the train office is when the guard takes his predictable bathroom break, which lasts about 60 seconds. And so they get Clean Willy out of prison so he can sneak into the office and unlock the door in the cabinet, while Agar then runs in while the guard is using the bathroom and he makes the copies. But Clean Willy, he eventually snitches on Pierce. But Pierce, as far as his plans for the train robbery, he kept his cards very close to his chest. And even Agar doesn't know the details of like what they're actually robbing until closer to the event. And so Clean Willy doesn't know exactly what Pierce is planning, but he knows he's planning something. And so he tells the cops this. And Pierce ultimately finds out about Clean Willy's betrayal and he has him killed because snitches get stitches after all. And then in the book, he throws the cops off his trail. And so he has this whole scheme of making them think he is robbing something else. And so they are not even thinking of the Crimean gold. But this is different in the movie because in the movie, they do assume he is stealing the Crimean gold because he does not throw them off the trail like he did in the book. And so in the movie, they're like, he's going to steal this gold. And so they implement extra precautions in order to prevent the gold from being stolen. Whereas in the book, they do implement extra precautions against the gold being stolen, but it is for a different reason. In the book, it's because this guy claims his expensive wine was stolen from the train. And so because of this, they put up more protective measures. And so in both book and movie, at the last minute, there are more preventative measures put in place, but it is for different reasons. But due to these new protective measures, they now need to find a new way to get Agar into the train car with the safes and the gold. And so they come up with the idea to put Agar in a coffin. And so he will go in the coffin, and then once he's in the train car, the guard guarding the safes is Burgess, the man who is in on it. And so once they get the coffin in there and the train car is closed, Burgess can let Agar out and then he can open the safes. However, even coffins are thoroughly checked, and guards, they'll even use a pin and poke the dead bodies to make sure they are actually dead and not a smuggler. But then also at this time, there was a real fear of being buried alive. And so there was this whole side business of people who created different contraptions and different coffins that would help prevent you from burying a loved one alive. And one of them was to have a bell on top of the coffin, and a string was attached down to inside the coffin so that if the person woke up, they could pull the string, ring the bell, and you knew they were actually alive. So they have Agar in a coffin such as this. And then also with Agar, they also include a dead cat. That way they can get the dead body smell going on. And so while they have this coffin on the train platform, before the guy is going to open the coffin and check, Agar rings the bell. And so Miriam is pretending to be this dead man's sister. And so she freaks out, being like, oh my gosh, he's still alive. Like, please open it, hurry, hurry. And so it's just very hectic as she is yelling and saying things, and they're trying to hurry and open this, and the bell is ringing. Actually, in the book, the bell just rang slightly, whereas in the movie, it's just like continuously ringing. But anyway, they open the coffin, and when they open it up, they see that Agar is like clearly dead. And the sister, Miriam, she then like pretends to faint and to freak out, knowing now that he actually is really dead. And so in all this commotion, rather than thoroughly check the body, they just open it up. They see the way he looks, they smell the dead cat, and they just hurry and shut it again, right? Because Miriam is so traumatized by having to see her dead brother. And so that is how they were able to evade the guards, giving the body a thorough search. And she also had said he died of cholera too. And so when they hear that, they're like, ooh, keep your distance. But yeah, the shot of Agar in the coffin, that is what scared me as a child because they made him look pretty disturbing. So yeah. But then the other problem now is that Agar is in the train car. However, now the train car is locked from the outside, and they need to be able to open the train car because once they transfer the gold into these bags, the plan is to dump it out part way, and there is a guy waiting in the field somewhere to go pick up the gold. And so then Pierce, he is also riding the train. And so he has to get out of his train car while the train is moving and like run along on top of it, get to the last car, and using ropes, he straps himself down to be in front of the lock. That way he can pick the lock and open it up for them. However, this process causes him to become incredibly sooty and dirty. And so Agar has to take off his clothes and give them to Pierce. That way Pierce can change into clean clothes. Because Fowler was also on this train, Miriam is sent to distract him. But yeah, he's like, if Fowler sees me and I'm all sooty, he's gonna know something is up. And so that's why he changes into Agar's clothes. But yeah, in both book and movie, they are able to successfully steal the gold, replace it with lead, toss it out the train car, and Pierce is able to make it back to his train car and change into clean clothes. However, then in the movie, once he gets off of the train, remember in the movie, they had suspected that he was after the gold, right? And then ultimately he ends up being arrested like right away, partly because he's wearing Agar's clothing, which doesn't fit well, and so it rips. And so he ends up being arrested. And then some unknown time has passed and he is sent to trial, and we see that the crowd is just cheering him on and they love him. And while he is leaving the courthouse, a woman goes and kisses him, and we find out that this woman is Miriam in disguise, and in the kiss, she transferred the key to his handcuffs. And so then in the movie, he uncuffs himself, and then he beats up the police officers, and then he jumps on the prison carriage that was going to take him away. But Agar is driving the carriage, and so he successfully rides off to freedom with Agar. Whereas in the book, so after the robbery takes place, they get away with it, and their plan is to hide the gold and wait a certain amount of time before they spend it. And so yeah, once they find out that the gold is stolen, it is just the talk of the town, and everybody in England is speculating like, who stole this gold and how did they do it? That's crazy. But then a whole year passes before anyone is arrested. And once they are arrested, it is because Agar's girlfriend gets arrested for something and she doesn't want to be put in jail. And so she tells them like, hey, will you let me go if I tell you I have information on the train robbery? And Agar at this point is in jail for a different crime that he got caught for. So she tells them like Agar was in on it. And so then the cops are able to get Agar, and they are able to manipulate him into confessing everything he knows about the robbery. And so Pierce and Agar and Burgess are all arrested and tried for this robbery. And the robbery once again becomes the talk of the town with these arrests happening. And Agar and Burgess take the stand first, and then Pierce goes last. And when he's leaving the courthouse, once again, he is kissed by a woman who is assumed to be Miriam, and she transfers the key. But in the book, he actually does get in the prison carriage. And then once inside, once it's driven off, he then uncuffs himself, and the driver is this other getaway driver they used in the book who isn't even in the movie. And so he does escape in the end. However, it's not like the dramatic show like it was in the movie. And then, like I said, they hid the gold. However, when Pierce told them where the gold was hid, the cops went to look and there was nothing. And so the gold is never recovered. Pierce disappears. And so it is assumed that he got away with it and is living off the gold. Meanwhile, Agar and Burgess in the book, they are tried and convicted and sentenced for the crime. But then to share a little bit about the true story. So in real life, Pierce was a former employee of the Southern Eastern Railway. However, he was fired when he was caught gambling. And just in general, he doesn't seem to quite have been the suave gentleman he was made out to be in the book and movie. And then he did partner with Agar and Burgess. And then there were also other people too that he partnered with who weren't even featured in the movie. But we don't have any clean Willy here in real life. And also there is no smuggling Agar in a coffin. There is no pretending to date one of the banker's daughters. And in fact, all 4 keys were kept at the train station, so there were no bankers who had the keys. But in real life, they did replace the gold with lead, like we see in the movie. And then to get the gold off of the train, they don't toss it out of the train car in real life. Some of it they put like stored under their clothing, and then some of it they just had bags that they simply carried off. And initially they are successful. However, in real life, it was Agar's girlfriend yet again who turned them in. But in real life, it is because Agar was getting arrested for a different crime after the train robbery happened. And before he gets sent away, he asks Pierce to look after his girlfriend financially, and Pierce agrees. However, Pierce goes back on his word and he's not helping out the girlfriend. And so she's upset, so she goes to the police and tells them what she knows. And then yeah, in real life, everybody involved was tried and sentenced and served their time, including Pierce. No dramatic escape. But now to return to the book and movie and just some of the differences between the two. So like one of the things I loved about this book was all of the London history. For example, Clean Willy, he had been a chimney sweep when he was a child, and because of that, his hands got such severe burns that they are now numb because people would leave their fires going right up until the last minute. And so these young boys who were like clambering up this chimney, it would be crazy hot, giving them these severe burns. And so that was insane. But also, this book gets into how women weren't tried for crimes, and rather if they committed a crime, their husbands were the one who were tried and sentenced for it. And that was because they assumed that women were just not capable of being bad in certain ways, but also they were thought to be too stupid. And we read in the book, in 1847, the police raided Mary Taggart's coining operation, catching her red-handed in the midst of her stamping out 6-penny pieces. She greeted the raid with equanimity, announced pleasantly that she was married, and told the police the whereabouts of her husband. By law, a husband was responsible for any criminal activities of his wife. It was assumed that such activity must be the result of the husband's planning and execution, in which the wife was a mere and perhaps unwitting unwilling participant. And I tried to Google this because obviously there were women who were arrested and killed for things back in the day, right? But I feel like oftentimes you hear about women being arrested for sexual related things like adultery or whatever. And so I'm like, maybe they just weren't arrested for crimes like this, forgery, crimes that they thought were like above a woman's capability. They then arrested the husband. But yeah, I wanted to learn more about this piece of history, but I couldn't find any articles about it. So if you know more about this and if this is accurate, definitely let me know and let me know where I can read more, because that is so interesting. But also the fact that there really was a fear of burying people alive. And part of this was from Edgar Allan Poe. Like, people were freaked out by his stories of someone being buried alive. But also there were real instances where people were buried alive. So it became this very lucrative business in order to prevent this from happening. And then also the police were relatively new at this time. So it was interesting reading how that impacted Londoners and thieves alike. And then even details I didn't like reading about, for example, the dog fighting or the age of consent being 12. Those were things that I'm like, ugh. And yet at the same time, it did add to what the world was like in this time. And yeah, just so many little details really brought this world to life in such an immersive way. And in the movie, we do visually see London, Victorian London, and yet even so, it just didn't compare to the atmosphere in the book. And then also in the book, we hear so much more about the way this train robbery gripped society and how they were just obsessed with it for a while. And the movie does show us, how they were cheering for him at the end, and it seems like it was a big deal. And yet, because things in the end are just sped up so much, I feel like we really didn't get a grasp of, just what a big deal this train robbery was at the time. But then also his escape too, like uncuffing in front of this whole group of people and beating up all the cops and being able to get away. Like, I get some of the people, like we see Fowler is blocked off by the people and he can't reach Pierce. But seriously, he was able to just ride off. Like, were there not any other cops around that could have chased him? Like, it almost seemed too easy. And it's like 6 police officers he is able to beat up and knock out. So it was a bit too Hollywoodized, a bit too far-fetched, and so I didn't love the ending there. But then to move on to book versus movie. So one of my complaints with this movie is that it has a bit too much over-explaining being done, in part through voiceover that is unnecessary. But then also we get this scene where Agar does a pickpocket and then later he is telling Pierce about it. And literally it was like 60 seconds ago. And yet the movie feels the need to show us the scene all over again because they assume the audience was too stupid not to have seen the pickpocket happen. And I'm watching it being like, we literally just saw this. Like, do you really think so little of the audience that you need to show this to us again? And then the movie also doesn't have the best pacing. Like in the book, we hear how keys are everything and people were obsessed with keys at this time, right? Because that was how you had access to things. And so that takes up a large part of the planning and the work leading up to the robbery is just them getting these keys. And I liked the schemes and the key making and all of that in the book. However, I feel like the thrill of it didn't quite transfer as well to the movie. And I also saw movie reviewers complain that this is called the Great Train Robbery, and yet the train robbery doesn't happen until over halfway through the movie. And so I do think they could have got to that a bit sooner. And then some scenes like the fake brothel, it sort of had The Sting vibe in some ways. And I wanted just so much for this movie to be the kind of heist con movie worthy of being compared to The Sting. But ultimately it just was not as smart or satisfying or exciting as The Sting. But to be fair, maybe The Sting isn't the best comparison because Great Train Robbery is not a con man movie. It is a heist movie. So really the better comparison is Ocean's 11 because Ocean's 11 and Great Train Robbery, it has a guy, the mastermind, coming up with this robbery and then recruiting the right people for each job. And so it was giving me Ocean's 11 vibes. However, Ocean's 11, again, is much more entertaining, much more satisfying, much more fun, much more engaging than the Great Train Robbery. And the stunts are impressive, I will say that. And Sean Connery, he did his own stunt, climbing on top of this moving train. And it was moving, I think I read like 50 miles an hour. It was moving faster than he realized it would be. And then he really was like getting the ropes down below in front of that lock. And then also Clean Willy, he really is climbing up these walls, like free solo basically. And so the stunts are impressive, but they're not impressive enough to save the movie. And I just went into this so excited and so ready to love it. But ultimately, due to Crichton feeling like he needed to hold the hands of the audience throughout so much of the movie, and then also due to the bad pacing at times, ultimately I'm gonna say the book wins. Even though after I read this book, I felt sure I would prefer the movie because again, the book was so cinematic. But yeah, the movie was a bit of a disappointment. I didn't hate it and I would still recommend it, and I would recommend the book as well. I feel like I'm being a bit too hard harsh on it now in the end because like it was fine. I enjoyed it. I could see myself potentially watching it again. I don't think I would watch it by myself, but maybe if I was with someone else. But yeah, and then the book I would definitely recommend as well. Just aside from those two parts I mentioned earlier, those definitely, knocked it down a little bit. Yeah, regardless, I definitely enjoyed these, but the book does win over the movie. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and also let me know what is your favorite heist movie. I mentioned I like Ocean's 11, so if you have any other books or movies that are similar to Ocean's 11, I also love con man movies like The Sting. That's one of my favorites. So if you know any that are on par with The Sting, especially if it's a book that was adapted into a movie that I can do a video on, definitely comment and let me know down below in the comments. And also the reason I chose to cover this movie right now was because the death of Donald Sutherland. It brought it to mind yet again, and so rest in peace, Donald Sutherland. I've covered a number of his recently. This is my third one because I also did Invasions of the Body Snatchers as well as Ordinary People. So if you want to check either of those out, I will link to them. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.